So today we're going to be looking at how I made my guitar sounds, and we're going to be looking at a couple different sounds that I've used in my songs before. So 99% of the time I'm going to be recording my guitar straight into my audio interface. So you won't actually need a guitar amp or a microphone to do this. Now, when it comes to recording guitars, there's a couple things that you need to keep in mind and they can play around with to alter the details in your recording. For example, the kind of strings that you're using or the tuning on your guitar, and obviously the pickups on your guitar are going to make a huge difference to the recording too. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about that right now, but keep in mind that the sound that you put in is going to have a major difference to the sound that's going to come out at the end of the chain too. Alright, so I use Ableton to record and process most of my guitar sounds, but of course you can use any DAW for this. And when it comes to processing your guitars, there's a couple great plugins out there that you can use to kind of emulate the sound of a real guitar amp. I'm going to be using a plugin called Bias FX and Guitar Rig. So let's start off with this sound that I made for one of my songs called Forever. It's a very mellow and pretty standard guitar tone, and it sounds like this. So for this one, I'm using Guitar Rig and I'm using a preset called Vintage Plex. If I remember correctly, this is also the preset that I've used on my song In Your Eyes, and it's on many of my older songs too. I might have changed some of these parameters over here. Feel free to copy them if you really want to. I've also bypassed the delay and the reverb, and then I'm adding those back over here. So these are pretty standard delays and reverbs, just adding some multiband compression too. And if you want to go for this exact sound, I am recording this on a Fender Telecaster, and I'm having the pickup switch on the neck position, and I'm rolling back a little bit of the tone just to make sure it's not too bright. Alright, so this next sound is a sound that I made for one of my songs called Backwards Love, and it sounds like this. Okay, so for this one, I'm just using the Ableton stock saturator, and I'm using this just to boost the incoming guitar signal a little bit because it's very low. Then I'm going into the Pro Q2 by FabFilter, and I'm just using this to get rid of the harsh frequencies in my guitar. Then these three plugins right here are really the plugins that make up for the sound of this tone, and they're the RC20 plugins. They're great plugins, and they're very popular nowadays. A little bit overused, but they do the job most of the time. The first thing I'm doing is I'm using the preset called VHS. I might have changed some things over here. Feel free to copy this if you really want to. I turn down the magnitude to 25%. And then on this next one, I'm using the No More Boring Pads preset. Again, I might have changed some things, so feel free to copy that if you want to. Then lastly, I'm using the Lush and Crunch Guitar 2. And these three plugins really make up for the sound of this tone. Then what I'm doing here, and this is a very interesting plugin, this is a dynamic EQ. This is a plugin called F6 by Waves. And this basically gets rid of the harsh frequencies, and also when you're doing these big slides down the neck of the guitar, like this. They can be very harsh sometimes, and you can visually see it working when you hit those certain frequencies. So that's a great plugin to get rid of weird things in your recordings. Up next, I have some compression, and I'm using the OTT by Xfair. You can of course use the stock Ableton OTT as well. And then lastly, I'm using some reverb just to give some space to the sound of the guitar. And that's pretty much it. It's a fairly simple sound, but it sounds great. Alright, so let's move on to this last guitar chain, and this is kind of my go-to guitar chain when I just want to be inspired in the moment, or I just want to punch in some guitar recordings. And this is a very versatile sound because you can play some semi-clean chords with this. But it also has a certain edge to it, so you can also play some great single note melodies with this. So I'm using Bias FX for this one, and in my opinion, this is one of the better plugins if you really want to go for a real sounding amp recording. And I'm using one of the plugins called Just Funny. I don't remember exactly what the original preset looked like, but I ended up changing some things. So feel free to copy that over if you really want to. I'll just run you through all the settings here. I don't think I've changed too much on these things. So the next thing I'm doing here is adding some compression, and this is especially helpful when you're playing fingerstyle like this, because it's gonna sustain the notes a little bit longer and it makes sure that your guitar notes don't die off as soon. Next thing here is the CLA guitars. Now a lot of people know this plugin from the CLA vocals, but I only discovered there was a guitar version of this too like a couple months ago. But it's actually quite helpful, and it's great to like dial in the sound real quick. It also has this re-amplify mode that you can use as a emulation of an amp, but for this case I've just bypassed it and I've just used these settings to kind of help shape the sound of the guitar. And then lastly, I'm adding some delay with Echo Boy, and I think this is one of the best delay plugins out there. It sounds great on vocals and it sounds great on guitars too. Alright, so that was pretty much it. I hope you guys liked the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and maybe I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.